not long to yet.
Hello, lovely listeners. We are coming to you today with a special episode. We'll be back to our more usual programming soon, but we are bringing you an interview with some very special guests today who have some exciting news to share. And we didn't want to rest on our laurels for this one. We wanted to bring you to your ears as quickly as you could so you could get excited along with us.
Regular listeners will have heard us talk on many occasions about Greg and Dana Newkirk. And we first came across their work during the early days of their museum, then known as the Travelling Museum of the Paranormal and Occult. And over the years, they've made multiple TV appearances, toured with their museum, created a fantastic museum community and magical practitioner school, produced the award-winning high strangeness series Hellier, most recently produced a podcast, the Haunted Objects podcast, which came out last autumn alongside a rebrand of the museum, now called the Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal. And I'm really missing so much off your resume here, but you two are like paranormal whirlwinds. We can barely keep up.
But the reason we're so excited today is because you have a new project coming out, and maybe I'd say it's less of a project and more of a journey. But enough of my ramblings, or our ramblings. Greg and Dana Newkirk, welcome to Knock Once for Yes.
Oh my God.
Hello.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. It made me feel so important.
We like to give a warm welcome. And so please tell us, but with no spoilers, because for everybody that is very excited about this upcoming project, this is a spoiler-free zone today. But can you tell us a little bit about your upcoming release, please?
Well, we have it's the first feature-length documentary that we've released. This is sort of a spiritual successor to the last two seasons of Hellier. It's called The Unbinding, and it's about an item that ended up in the museum and caused everyone a bit of distress.
To put it lightly.
To put it lightly. It was the first thing that we've ever taken back to where it came from, something that needed to be returned. And throughout that journey, it really changed the way that we interact with the ideas of haunted objects and hauntings in general. It's completely changed the way that I see ghosts. And I think for a lot of viewers, it'll probably do the same thing.
Awesome. And kind of leading on from that, at this point, I just wanted to give a little bit of context for our listeners, really, about how we found you guys' work so that we can all understand why we're so excited about this film. Because covering documentaries isn't something we normally do, but as you've just sort of implied, we feel like this one's going to be quite a bit different. So we've talked many times on this show about the various reasons we started the podcast. And a big one, a really big one, was how disenchanted we were with what was on paranormal TV at the time and just happening in the paranormal world, in the paranormal community. We felt that people's stories were being lost and written off. Nobody was interested in people's stories anymore. Everybody was looking for video evidence and audio evidence, and it was all about trying to make it more scientific and using gadgets and things like that. And this was at the sort of peak ghost hunting TV time, and we were just feeling really sort of jaded. We didn't vibe with the whole running around in the dark yelling at ghosts. We didn't like the shock value. We didn't like, that a lot of investigators were becoming quite disrespectful. And it felt really uncomfortable to us. And we were at the point where we were thinking, perhaps this isn't our world, perhaps the paranormal, even though we were so interested and had been all our lives, we were feeling like maybe this isn't for us. And there were a few sort of key things and people that happened and that we found around that time. And this was in the early days of your museum. And we came across your work, and it was just such a relief. It was like a big sigh of relief to come across investigators who were investigating in a respectful, compassionate way, but also investigating with a sense of fun and curiosity instead of terror. And that has always shone through in your work. So we knew this documentary was pretty much going to break the mold a bit on what we've all become used to seeing on paranormal TV. And that's why we can't wait for all our listeners to watch it. And that really brings me to my first question, in that we both grew up not seeing ghosts as particularly weird. No. In Britain at that time, at least where we grew up, it wasn't it wasn't strange to talk about ghosts.
Yeah.
Every village pub had a ghost. You know, we saw academics on TV talking about ghosts as, you know, as an academic pursuit. Our families sort of thought that ghosts were pretty much part of the furniture. They were normal.
Yep. My family, we very much had like family ghosts that were just normal. It was weird if people didn't see them.
Yeah, exactly.
You lucky
wonderful.
ducks.
And a lot of the sort of, even the children's books I read so many children's books growing up that were just, they normalized hauntings and ghosts and, you know, haunted old houses that just had these historical people from the past haunting them. It was quite normal. So I think that's why it sort of clashed so much when we were older and we started seeing these shows on TV, and there was this sense of fear and terror, and it was sinister. And so, you know, I can understand why we have such a different view of the paranormal to what was being reflected. But I'm really interested for each of you, how did you guys come to that perspective? What was that like for you? How did you get to that point of seeing the sense of fun and wonder and amazement rather than fear?
Think I can only speak for myself, but I think that same frustration that you're talking about, I think Greg and I felt in the very, very early days of us investigating the paranormal, which would have been for me in like 1999, 2000, and maybe a little earlier for Greg. And I think that we really never felt, and we've never really felt, that we sort of had a place in it.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, I think we just realized that we needed to make our own place. And so we just sort of hoped, it was sort of like a, if you build it, they will come kind of scenario.
We hoped anyway.
If we put out the way that we felt about things, hopefully other people who felt the same way would gravitate towards it. And then we could have dialogue and communication. And then a larger portion of people who are coming at this from almost, you know, a place of compassion or humanity, as opposed to, you know, looking for demons and screaming and fighting ghosts and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully, you know, like that, you know, you'd feel more compelled to join in the conversation. And I think that more than anything, I see that happening now. So I think that would probably be my answer.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous of your histories and able to grow up that way. And I think, you know, there's a natural distinction because, you know, Americans are very puritanical, and I come from a very religious background. You know, I talk about it a bit in the documentary. And so for me growing up, these things were all not to be messed with. You know, they were don't mess with them because they're, you know, they're tools of the devil. They're here to trick you. And, you know, the one thing you can always count on with kids is they're going to do exactly what you tell them not to do, you know? So me and my friends were obsessed. You know, I grew up watching, you know, the X-Files and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and things like that. So I always had an interest in the occult. And I think part of the reason why we're a little bit different is because we got here by accident. I wasn't watching Ghost Hunters. I wasn't watching any of that stuff. My friends and I, we were LARPing when we first started out. You know what I mean? We were like, we were going to the cemetery to scare our friends. And then when weird things would happen, we'd be like, oh my goodness, these things are real. And we'd be at the library reading about stuff and, you know, reading some of the same material that you guys were no doubt reading because it was coming from Britain. And so that's the type of stuff that I was raised on. And you know, and even me, it took a little while to get out of that headspace where these things, you know, were supposed to be scary.
Yeah. I think that you probably would notice that in America, you know, especially in the paranormal community here, a lot of the foundation of what we're kind of working with was really, you know, laid down by people like Ed and Lorraine Warren and people who are bringing a lot of, you know, their religion and their, you know, their beliefs into that space. And that doesn't really make it great for people who don't adhere to the same belief systems and don't believe the same things. And so there's a lot of that to sort of pick through a lot. And I think it's getting better. I see it getting better.
I do too.
Yeah.
And, you know, we just threw out all the old stuff.
Yeah.
And then we're like, let's just see what actually happens if we try to be nice to these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it upsets me sometimes because we get emails from people who say, you know, oh, you know, I've got this stuff happening at my house and it's really scary. And when you get down to what's actually happening, it's not that bad. You know, people say,
sure.
oh, my cupboard door opened. And I'm like,
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then the flip side of that is, that can be scary if you don't have a handle on what's going on and you don't know why it's happening and you haven't experienced it before. I mean, even us, we had lots of paranormal experiences before we moved into the house we're living now. But when we moved in, we did have stuff start to happen. And we found it a little bit spooky at the time until we kind of got our heads around it and realised it was just, trying to communicate.
Yeah, it makes you jump a little bit, but it's sad that people go, oh, it's really scary, rather than thinking, oh, maybe it's just trying to communicate. And it's nice to get to that point, and that I see you guys doing that's like, it's, it doesn't have to be scary. It's just trying to say hi.
Well, that's exactly what we're saying all the time. We're asking people who are experiencing these things, have you tried talking to it? And the answer is, almost always, well, no, of course not.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of it too is one of the things when people come to us to ask us for advice on strange things happening in their house or around them, I think often our first, the approach that we take is really hopefully an empowering one where we can kind of normalize the experience for people, because I think people feel weird about maybe talking to just anyone about strange things happening to them. Definitely. So there's a hope in normalizing that so that people feel more comfortable to talk and share about, these experiences that they're having. But also there's an element there of wanting to empower people so that they understand that these are situations that, you can live with and you can.
And lots of people have. And this has been happening to people since people were able to talk.
Yeah. And there's lots of options for how we observe and communicate and interact with this phenomena. And not just the one that you see on TV. And so it's kind of like it's showing people that hopefully leading them to their own empowerment in those situations.
I'd feel lost without our ghost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
ghost like a family
so
friend.
Plural.
Yeah, ghosts. But yeah.
Recently acquired a new one by accident. Happens sometimes.
I love it.
Well, I think, but I was going to save this question for later, but it really ties into what we've been talking about is one of the things very close to our hearts, and we've always tried to get better at doing the podcast, is responsible storytelling. And you guys refer to it as being a good ghost machine, which I love that term. Tell us, what is being a good ghost machine and why is it so important? Because it really reflects on what we were just talking about in a lot of ways.
I think the best way to describe it is, the longer we've done this, the more I come to the conclusion that we are inseparable from the phenomena. We are part of the phenomena. Whatever is happening, and, I don't have answers for it. I have ideas, I have theories, but whatever is happening to people when they go through something strange, I think that we are inseparable from it. And even more so, I think that, we're part of a co-creative process in that way, where I think that we are able to give a voice to things that don't have one. We're able to manifest things that can't manifest on their own. And a lot of that happens through our sense of belief and through our emotions. And it's not to say that these things don't exist. I just think that they need us to help them exist.
Absolutely.
And in that way, we've really come around to the idea of what kind of responsibility people in our positions have. And you guys know, you guys are telling people stories. This is important. And when I see the way that stories have been told around the paranormal, something that has been part of the human experience, for as long as we could tell stories, we've learned how to live. We've learned about what we consider happens to us after death through story. And I've watched what, particularly the American paranormal media has done with that type of storytelling that, frankly, I think is sacred.
Yeah.
And they have twisted it into something that's made every single bump in the night something to be afraid of instead of something to learn from, something to push us out of our comfort zones, something that will help us learn more about the world around us. And they've turned it into, if you don't understand it, you better be scared of it. Don't try and understand it. Call a priest, banish it, get rid of it. And that feels really irresponsible to me, because I've come to believe that a lot of paranormal phenomena is, spontaneous initiatory experiences. We all are, at least in America here, one of the things that you would do is you would go with your friends to the creepy house at the edge of town, the one that had the rumored, the witch haunted it or whatever it was. And you would go and test your bravery. And sometimes you would experience something genuinely strange, and it would change the way that you interact with the world. And we're not doing that the same way anymore. Now it's like, put on your tightest black t-shirt, slick your hair back, and go in there and try and suplex a ghost. You know what I mean?
Don't know what you're talking about.
And I just think that it's really caused a degradation of how we experience the numinous. We're not experiencing it in the same way. It's not a good experience for people anymore. And that's sad to me.
Yeah, we've sort of lost the complexity of it, and and I think you mentioned it earlier, but I think that these stories are so much a reflection of us, and when we lose the complexity and the nuance that exists there, and we forget that those are the spaces that we really learn about ourselves within these stories, I think that we really do a disservice to not only what, like Greg mentioned, I think is a sacred act, which is really, preserving and telling important stories. But we also lose out on the opportunity to discover those aspects of ourselves, when we forget about the importance of nuance. And so there's so much of it that's been degraded and lost. And so we're just really trying to remind people to come at things with a little bit more nuance, and to approach them with a bit more nuance.
I absolutely agree.
When we say, what to be a good ghost machine, what we're really saying is the stories that we tell, the more times we tell them, the more they take on the traits of those stories. Yeah. So, I've been to so many places, as I'm sure you guys have, where you've known about them and they didn't really have too many stories attached to them, but they appear on television one time. Mm-hmm. And then everybody starts telling the story about the goat man that comes down the hallway. And then people start to really experience that. Mm-hmm. And so to be a good ghost machine is to be responsible in how you're telling these stories, so that future generations who do experience the phenomena around those stories aren't, running for the hills. They're actually having a really wonderful experience that changes their outlooks.
Yeah, we actually, what you just mentioned, we came across a very interesting case of that recently. We were writing about an inn that was, I think it was built in medieval times. I can't remember the exact date, but there's always been this story about a ghost that haunted this inn. So much so that the local council have put an information plaque next to the pub with the ghost story on it. I mean, it's so entrenched, and people have seen it. There have been reports of witnesses seeing this ghost lady in the pub. And when we really dug down into it, what we found was that it was a member of the ghost club called Tony Cornell had done a Ouija board at this pub years and years ago, in the 50s, I think. And they'd had this ghost come through. And somehow the news of this supposed ghost coming through had got out. The papers got hold of it. The news went absolutely everywhere. Mm-hmm. The newspaper reporters descended on the pub. They organised a repeat experiment of the Ouija board the next October. And this story just took on a life of its own. Yeah. It became its own entity, and people started seeing it.
Yeah, it became fact for people.
Yeah, but when we really looked into the history and looked into what the Ghost Club member Tony Cornell actually had investigated himself, he couldn't find any evidence of this person anywhere. The dates were all wrong. The names were all wrong. The facts were all over the place, and he came out and admitted it publicly and said, we accidentally made up this ghost. It wasn't intentional, but it's just one of those things that's happened. It's not real. This person never existed. They can't be haunting here. But that ghost is now somehow in that pub.
It's still seen though. This is the thing.
Mazel tov. Congratulations on the birth.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's just so the idea of the ghost, being a ghost machine, and the stories you tell having such power is just so interesting to us.
I mean, it's magic.
Yeah,
it truly is. Mm-hmm. And I think that for some people, when they hear us say things like that, they think that we don't believe in it, or that they're not, what we're saying is they're not real. And I don't think that's the case.
No.
I think there is a subtle energy out there that looks for ways to exist where we do. And sometimes a good story is the best place for it to live. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we actually met somebody by chance in this pub who had seen the ghost.
Yeah,
well, of course.
See, exactly.
Of course. I mean, we see that with haunted objects all the time. That's I think the 90% of the stuff that people send to us, you know, they feel something from it, or they've put enough energy and intention or emotion into it that they experience strange stuff around it. But it isn't until there's, you know, the thing we've noticed is it isn't until somebody sends us something that has like a story that a lot of people have heard, or one that really resonates with us, that we begin to experience strange stuff around it. Yeah. And it's once you realize that, you start to get a little bit tweaked when it happens, and you're like, oh, we have to be really careful about, we're stewards of this thing now.
Yes, exactly.
You know, we're responsible for it to grow up into a respectable, nice ghost.
You've actually hit on about 2 or 3 different points that I wanted to raise with you, because I think you mentioned in the Unbinding that you feel that you're caretakers of the objects that you look after in the museum. And again, I don't want to get into too much detail because you do cover a lot of that in the Unbinding. Yeah. But because of the museum and the objects that you look after has become such a big thing, how did that start? Like, why did people start sending things to you?
Or did they? How did you acquire the first one? Where did it come from?
It was entirely by accident.
Like all the best things.
Yeah.
Entirely by accident.
I think mostly it was just because we've been doing this for so long that over the years, you know, friends or investigations we had been on or whatever kind of the scenario was, people would just start sending us things.
Yeah.
And we just sort of started to accumulate.
Oh, Greg and Dana are weird. Give it to them. You know,
we just, naturally started to accumulate things.
But it was never with the intention of starting a museum. It's just stuff that we'd had in boxes. And, you know, I was really good friends with people that were friends with people in the Amityville horror case. So we would get things from that case, or even just stuff like Dana said, our own investigations. Yeah. The first thing I ever collected was a little piece of coal, shale that was tossed at me in a cemetery when I was a kid. And I think that was the first, I mean, technically the first item in the collection.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of grew from there. And we were working for a travel startup here that they hired us on because they liked the stuff that we were writing about, and they needed people to be their weirdo beat. And so we were, you know, helping people take road trips to haunted places and places where Bigfoot had been spotted, and, you know, UFO crash sites in New Mexico. And they got invited to have a booth at a horror conference. And they're like, what should we do? I don't know. What are we going to do here? And I was like, well, we've got all this cool stuff. Like, let's just do a little pop-up museum. And it was such a hit. We never expected it. There were like a dozen items maybe on the table, but people got the chance to do something they didn't get to do anywhere else, is they got to handle these things. They got to have experiences with these. And we were like, whoa, maybe there's something to this. And so we started doing it, and then it just spiraled out of control. Everybody started sending us stuff, and you know, now I'm like looking out the door to our office here, and there's just, I mean, 12, 13 shelves just filled with boxes of stuff.
Yeah. But like you say, I think all the best things happen by accident and just spiral out of control.
They do.
It was a few years ago. I can't remember how many years ago, but a friend of ours who's an occultist that we love and respect, they said, I think your museum is building itself.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, we were like, you know what? I think you might be right. I think that it's just kind of naturally building itself.
It's intimidating.
It is a little bit. And I think that's why we do think of ourselves as caretakers, because we're just sort of, it's our job to just, you know, because there's even within the museum, there's a lot of objects that will never see the light of day. And that's for some reason, you know, maybe the client wants to remain anonymous and they don't want the story to be public, and that's totally fine. But with what we do, you know, a majority of the things that people will send us, they really do have a lot of trauma attached to them. And they've kind of compartmentalized that trauma and that fear. And so out of respect for them, and and just sort of the general public, we just sort of care for them. And, you know, there are things that we have that are just too triggering for the general public or for whatever reason, but we really do kind of think of it as a caretaking job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is the other side of being a responsible storyteller, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, a lot of the cases, you know, we were just talking about this the other day. Like we have a Ouija board that was sent to us. That's a very weird item because it's put together all strange, but it was because it was made with 2 planks from a murder site that had blood stains on it.
Yikes.
And, you know, we were geared up to do an episode about it for the Haunted Objects podcast. And as we sat down to do it, we just didn't feel right about it because some of the people that were involved in that murder are still alive.
Yeah. So it just didn't feel appropriate.
And so it's just probably going to be one of those things that just sits on the shelf and
that's fine.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you really just have to feel that stuff out as you go. And sometimes it's really hard and you do have to catch yourself and think, oh, no, wait. No, I need to take a step back from this.
Yeah. Well, I'm
For
glad it's you guys that are looking after it.
Yes, exactly.
We won't mention other people, but other people we
We all know who you're talking about.
It's landed in safe hands, thankfully. So in nearly all the interviews we do, we typically ask people, what was your first paranormal experience? But one of the things we really respect about you guys, because we've been talking about, you know, sort of taking a step back and checking in with ourselves and you know, continuous growth. And we really respect that about you guys, that you continuously, you know, learn and grow and take on new ideas, and you're open to basically having what you thought was your understanding of the paranormal blown out the water, and you're not afraid to just stand back and say, actually, we don't have a clue what any of this phenomena actually is. We don't know. So I think I'd rather turn the question around and ask for each of you, do you have an experience or a location or something that happened, an event that you'd be happy to share that really just flipped the script for you and made you take a step back and think, ooh, I thought I understood some things, and that's I really don't.
That's an
a
excellent
great question. I mean, I think my answer probably it's sort of simplified, but I think that for us, I think the investigation into Hellier has really been very changing. It's been a very changing experience for me, and I think that the process of that has. I mean, if you look at Dana in the first episode, even compared to just who I am today, I am so different. And like, just my beliefs are very different. And I also have a very different knowledge base now. And so I think that Hellier has been, the investigation into Hellier has been something that has given me a brand new brain. And I can utilize that brain for the kind of investigations that we're continuing to do into Hellier, but also in all of the other things. But it really was very paradigm shifting, and it really did give me an entirely new way of approaching the phenomenon, just the experiences that we've had, for sure.
I mean, I hate to piggyback on that answer, but I think you're right.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, people who are eagle-eyed viewers will realize that the Unbinding was taking place while Hellier was taking place as well. So there's a bit of crossover there. And both of those things, you know, it's funny because I was a different person coming out of that cave in the last episode of season 2 of Hellier than I was going in.
Yeah.
And I was a different person coming down the mountain from the ritual we did in the Unbinding at the end. Those two things really did change me fundamentally when it comes to how I look at this stuff, how I approach this stuff, and the way that I talk about it. Hellier gave me an immense sense of responsibility because we never expected it to be as popular as it was.
Yeah.
It just sort of, it came out of nowhere, and it's had a really long tail. And I think that particularly during the second season, the things that we were experiencing that shouldn't have been real, the people that we were talking to who were saying things to us that were very frightening and humbling, though all of those things together left us with a real sense of responsibility in how we should be telling stories and how we should be approaching stories. And I'm not the same person anymore. And for better or worse, I know it can be frustrating. You know, we run into a lot of people who get very frustrated that we don't want to we don't want to talk about orbs anymore, but it's made doing events like, paranormal conferences and things like that very hard because I don't feel challenged anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. If I'm not around people who are challenging me and challenging how I view this stuff, I get very frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been the biggest change is
Absolutely.
going through those two experiences and going through them in such a public way.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
Yeah, I bet. But I really hope that, and I really do think we saw this a bit with Hellier, and I really hope that we'll see it with the Unbinding as well. It's just that people will see that journey and that growth reflected in the films, in the documentaries, and they'll be able to take that on board. And it's just like a little reminder, a little kind of impetus that's okay, like growing and changing your mind about things and finding out that you didn't know what you thought you knew, and moving forwards from that is a good thing.
Yeah, not just that it's okay, but that it's exciting and interesting and cool.
Yeah.
I don't want to think the same thing in 5 years that I'm thinking right now.
No,
I feel like I've lost if that's the case.
One of the things Greg and I will say constantly is we never want to be the smartest people in a room.
Mm-hmm.
No.
We always want to be challenging.
Make me feel dumb,
yes,
baby.
I love it. I want to, but it's this, at this point, I think it's become, the desire for expansion and it growing and thinking differently and exposing ourselves to different types of ways of thinking. And that was really part and parcel with the Hellier investigation, I think.
Yeah.
And something that came up in Hellier and the Unbinding, and as you say, is kind of a different way of thinking, certainly for many people, is, Dana, your use of magical practice in your investigations.
Mm-hmm.
And it often seems to provide a kind of balance that can otherwise feel missing somehow. Do you think that your practice of magic gives you sort of an extra window into the phenomena that other people are just missing out on?
I think it does. I'm a big champion for paranormal investigators to get to know the occult a little bit more. You don't have to be an occultist, but at least expose yourself to it a little bit more and understand the language a little bit more. Because I really think that occultists would make wonderful paranormal investigators, and most of them really aren't very interested in it, but I think that they really would. And part of it is, for me, at the very least, it's that my energetically, I feel that I can permeate that space a bit more, and I have a little bit more, even if it's a subjective experience, which it more often than not is, and then I kind of have to explain it to the rest of the group again from that subjective place. But I think that the occult and just magic in general kind of prepares you for traversing weirder energies and discerning energies and discerning what's going on maybe in an unseen place. And so I really think that there's an element of that helps the foundations of how I investigate the paranormal is really that ability to discern what's happening in places that I can't necessarily see. I think is really helpful for sure.
Yeah, I really feel like it seems to bring like an extra dimension to the investigations. Yeah. It's almost like they pop from 2D into 3D.
Yeah, it really feels that way as I explore it. And at this point, it's sort of become, I've spent in the years since the last season of Hellier, which has been a few years at this point, I've kind of gone into like an intense boot camp of like intuition development. Yeah. And like just occult and esoterica studies just in general. I've really inundated myself with it a lot. And I feel even more fascinated with the paranormal, which is so funny because you'd think it would be the opposite. But the more I become, I have the ability to discern, or I feel I do, the more it becomes fascinating to me. And like you said, it develops sort of a third dimensional feeling. It feels very multi-dimensional, to be honest with you. Like there are so many, it's an onion and there's lots of layers that you can kind of permeate and explore and look at. And I really feel that a foundational understanding of the occult and esoterica can really be helpful for a lot of paranormal investigators. And it also gives us that ability to have many different opinions, and we can look at things with lots of different hats. And so it's kind of, I think, a very valuable thing.
Absolutely. And kind of, again, jumping off from that a bit, while we're sort of talking about breaking the mold a bit on what we're used to seeing on TV and reflected in the paranormal communities, one of the things I love about the way you guys investigate is that you never lose a sense of fun. And I don't mean fun in a reckless, kind of irresponsible way. I just mean a joyful, a playfulness, a sense of humour, not taking yourselves too seriously. And I feel like one of the bad things about the paranormal culture in Britain is because for a lot of years we did see it very much, especially because we're a bit old. So for our generation,
we won't tell.
We saw it represented on the telly. Sure. As just being the realm of academics, and they were all sort of pipe smoking and tweed jackets with leather elbow patches, and they were all very lovely. But unfortunately, it has translated into being a little bit gatekeepy over here. Sometimes we've encountered some people in the field that they're very serious, and they don't think that investigations should be done by normal people, and obviously we don't think that spreads a very helpful message. But why do you think that keeping that sense of fun, not taking yourselves too seriously, and that kind of playfulness in investigations, why do you think that is so important?
I mean, because I think that it's co-creative. I think that the phenomena wants to play with us. And I think that the more we play with it and the more that we are having a good time, it will manifest around that. And I think also that you get what you ask for. So if you are nervous and scared and set on edge, the things that you experience are going to be more scary, and you're going to make you more nervous, and they're going to make other people nervous too. And it's very, very, very important for us to, not come across as people that are, I have a high school education. You know what I mean? I'm not a scientist. I'm not a parapsychologist. I'm not going to tell you how the details of how, the electromagnetic spectrum is going to cause, hauntings or whatever. I probably have theories on that I can talk about, but, I'm not a scientist. And I'm not trying to make anyone believe that I am. We have a real problem over here with people calling themselves parapsychologists.
As if it's just a label that you're
right.
Not a doctorate.
And not a doctorate, which is crazy because there's only like 3 places you could get
and
that
none of them are
title.
Here.
No, they're not here.
They're over where you guys are.
Yeah, actually, one of them's in our hometown.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
But it's very important for us to never come across as these stuffy academics. And academics aren't all stuffy. We love folklorists.
Yeah, folklorists are amazing.
They're the coolest. We love to talk to them. And there's parapsychologists that are cool too.
Yeah.
But it's, there's a sense of, like you said, the gatekeepy stuff. I want to give people the tools to experience things in their own way. I don't want to tell people what to believe because at least over here, that's very common. Every show is holding your hand, telling you what to think by the end. I don't want to do that. I want to give you new ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And you can take them or leave them. I don't want to force you to think anything. I'm not trying to make anyone a believer. If I've found that if people are following a journey that they're invested in and we're giving them the same tools and resources that we're using, they can use those things and they can go out and actually have a fun time doing something. They don't feel like they're following a rule book.
Yeah.
Because what are the rules? You know what I mean? There's no rules.
Yeah. And at this point, the molds have sort of been set often, at least in America, by paranormal television and the way and inspired often. People are inspired to go out and investigate because they've seen it on TV, and then they kind of do the exact same things they've seen on TV. And so for us, we're always trying to not necessarily throw out the rule book, but we know the rules. Let's break them.
Yeah.
We're all familiar with the rules, so let's break them. We know what we're doing, and we can explore, and we can introduce new modes and different ways of investigating different kinds of experiments, but we've got the rules set. Like, we figured it out. Let's now it's the time to break them.
Some of the best things that we've ever experienced, some of the craziest paranormal phenomena we've ever experienced has been when we're having fun.
Yeah.
When you're just having a good time with your friends, and then all of a sudden something wants to join. That I think is I think the playfulness is a key to having those types of experiences in a really positive way. Otherwise, like I said, if you can change the energy into space by going in and cranking a ghost box and just hearing that aggressive, like
everyone.
everybody like screaming about wanting to fight the monsters in the building. It's not going to be a very positive experience for anyone, I don't think.
And it seems like the more confident you are, what something is, the less likely you are to investigate it. You're going to miss out on things because you already think you know the answer.
Yeah. A big rule that we have, and it's kind of a red flag that we're always, anytime we see it, we're like, ugh, is speaking in absolutes about any of this, because anyone who speaks in absolutes about something there's no evidence, solid evidence for, is wild. And so we're always avoiding that as much as we possibly can.
Well, and if you've decided what you're going to find before you get there, you've already lost the plot.
Yes.
And you've lost the fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's no sense of discovery. You've already limited the possibilities of what you can experience.
And talking of fun, I presume a lot of the things that you receive in the museum are because people are terrified of something. But are there any objects that are just have an amazing sense of humor or really fun, or are there any locations or events that you've investigated where something has just been like a really good time?
Or kooky.
You know what? I never have more fun than when we're Bigfoot hunting.
Yeah. I mean, how can you not? It's ultimately like the most inner child gratifying experience. You're traipsing around the woods, screaming at the top of your lungs, hitting trees with sticks. Like, you're just behaving like a child. And it's so fun.
There's a playfulness to it.
Absolutely.
And the best experiences we've had doing it have been with people who embody that sense of play.
They really do.
There were a couple guys by the name of Dallas and Wayne who are out of Portsmouth, Ohio. Dallas has passed away, bless his soul. But they were, we went with them because we thought we were going to have like a fun experience with a couple quirky personalities. There's a really great documentary about these guys called Not Your Typical Bigfoot Hunters.
Oh, okay.
And
they definitely are.
They are not. Like, to give you an example, Dallas started crying while he told us about one time he was in the woods by himself and he started choking, and Bigfoot came out of a portal and gave him a Heimlich maneuver and saved his life. Wow. And of course, this was many years ago, and we're hearing this and we're like, oh, so this guy's crazy. You know what I mean? But that night, we had the most incredible Bigfoot experience we've ever had. The howls that started coming out of this place. We were in the middle of nowhere. We're in the mountains, a place they called the Boneyard.
They took us up a mountain, about 5 miles up a mountain in the middle of nowhere. It was where a local farmer would drop dead cattle. Yeah, cattle. Like so it was essentially like a Bigfoot buffet. It was nestled between two kind of big parts of the mountain. And we thought we were going to go with them into the woods and we were going to be traipsing around. And they started a campfire and then they sat down and they just let it happen around them.
Oh,
and so
awesome.
It was an incredible experience. We heard, two large sounding beings.
I've never been more scared.
Yeah.
I mean, truly.
Greg locked himself in the car.
I went and sat in the van. I was so scared of it.
He was ready to go.
It was so close and it was throwing stones at us.
And they were just laughing and having fun. And they were like really in the moment. And I think that was honestly that night, that investigation, I think that really changed who we were, because we went into it a little jaded, kind of thinking, this is going to be silly, but it'll be fun. And it was silly and fun. But what happened was that we literally recorded what, in our opinion, is like the most incredible Bigfoot experience that we've ever had. Yeah. Like we were able to actually have that experience. And so it did immediately sort of have that. We were able to look at that and go, wow, if we go into things a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more willing to kind of break the rules and do things our own way and approach it from that perspective, we had a very different experience, an incredible experience. And we've sort of taken the soul of that night with us forward into a lot of the ways that we investigate. So humor and fun and friendship is part of it, and just and enjoying the process, enjoying the experience, because it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be having fun.
I wish more people sent us fun stuff in the mail.
Yeah.
It's usually like masks
Boxes
smeared
of
with
hair.
human poop.
Yeah,
and like,
we get a lot. Yeah,
yeah, weird stuff
we
like
get a
that.
lot of weird things. Like we get a lot of Polaroids and like
Somebody sent us ashes.
ashes.
The dead person's ashes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like one of the things that we get a lot, and we poke fun at it a little bit, is we do have a box of porcelain clown.
Oh, my living nightmare.
Which is it's like
Right.
it's just, or we get a lot of like in America there's a store called Hot Topic, and it's like a gothy kind of emo store. We get a lot of Hot Topic incense burners with dragons and stuff on them. We have a lot of those.
We did get a Bratz doll.
We do have a Bratz
There was a
doll.
little Bratz doll that had a note that said it winked at my daughter.
Oh.
I don't care what you do with it. There is fun stuff once in a while, but usually it's something that
It's
somebody
mostly
has
gross and
usually
scary.
pretty messed up. Yeah.
I like the point you made though about how you were expecting to go sort of traipsing around the woods, not looking actively, hunting, I guess.
Yeah.
And what they did was sit and just have around the campfire, let it happen. I love that idea, and to be honest, I think in our experiences, that's when we've had the most exciting things happen.
And thinking about it,
100%
it's
agree.
probably the best way of doing it.
Yeah.
If you think if you're stalking an animal, if you're traipsing through the woods as a clumpy human, they're going to run away.
But
Whereas
how
if
many
you
times
just
have you just been sitting there and a deer has appeared because it doesn't realise you're there? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Give
I'm
off a
so
non-threatening
jealous.
vibe.
Yeah, we're
Have
very
fun.
jealous. Although we do have, it's not exactly a Bigfoot, but in the in Thetford Forest on the East Coast, not too far from us, there's something that's called a woodwose. Well, there's meant to be something called a woodwose.
Oh, right.
It's a
yeah.
bit like Bigfoot. We have been to the forest a couple of times, and it has got a bit of an atmosphere, hasn't it? It's got a bit of an other kind of liminal place kind of atmosphere. And I must admit, I did do a Greg style whoop.
Yeah.
Nice.
Bravo.
Probably scared some locals. I've got quite a loud voice.
We worry about that every time. There's a place where we investigate a lot, and it's called Salt Fork State Park, and there's a ton of Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah.
It's a huge state park. It's like 700 acres or
the
something.
biggest
like that.
Bigfoot conference in the country
Yeah.
happens there
Wow.
every year.
And every time we're there, at night, whenever we go out and do our thing, I'm always like, there are other Bigfoot hunters out there right now who are
Yeah.
going, oh my God, do you hear that? Like we're
We're just
communicating.
talking to
Yes.
each other.
I'm always hyper aware of that. I'm like, oh, can you see flashlights or anything? Just let them know.
Yeah, there was probably somebody on the other side of Thetford Forest going, oh, I've heard it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, you just mentioned, and we mentioned earlier about the fact that you have been on network TV shows. You've been on quite a lot. You've been on Kindred Spirits, and prior to that, you've popped up in lots and lots of different network TV shows. But Hellier and The Unbinding, they are, individually produced. They are just produced by you independently. And also, in most paranormal TV shows, you get a location, the people get sent into the location, there's a premise, they're expecting to come out with something in particular. The Unbinding is so different. It takes place over a much longer time. And also, I feel like it's really got your Patreon community, the members of the museum, kind of becoming part of the journey. So what was that like? How different was that?
It's really important, because we've experienced both sides. We know how hard it is to make your own content. It's difficult, and we're very blessed to have some friends that are extremely talented.
Yeah.
We're so lucky to have found each other. And we've done, like you said, we've done network television. So we know how that goes, and we know what the immense restrictions on that are. But a network television doesn't, they would have never let us make Hellier.
No, never.
we had
Never.
conversations about that with some of them, and they wanted to take our entire series, cut it down into a single episode, and then we would go to like different goblin holes every.
They were like, you'd have to find a goblin every episode.
We're like,
no
every
one star, no
season.
goblins.
Yeah.
Yes.
Although there is a very funny one of the producers who we were talking to for one of these networks. He was like, "Yeah, well, we'll do this. We'll make this it's got to be a goblin show. It's a goblin centric show." And I was like, "I don't want to be the goblin guy."
No.
And there was
Are.
a beat, and he goes, buddy, I got news for you.
You are.
But we've been through all of that. When it came to making the Unbinding was only supposed to be a half-hour short. It really is what the proto Haunted Objects podcast is going to be.
Like little vignettes, sort of.
Yes, about each like really interesting story around different things in the museum. And as we sat down and did these interviews with our director Carl Pfeiffer, we had 4 to 8 hour interviews, and he's like, we gotta like tell this in a different way because this deserves a little more attention and polish. And we very intentionally set out to make a horror movie. We wanted to make something that looked and felt a little provocative and felt like something that was familiar to what standard paranormal documentary consumers would see, and then do it our way and show people what that journey was actually like for us. This is a rare instance where we actually have what feels like an ending. We have an end beat. For now. I mean, who knows what we're going to experience when this is in the wild and people are seeing it, and maybe we'll get, more people reaching out from the town that this took place in, and we'll have more to tell. But it's a rare thing when you have like a natural endpoint for a story like this. And it helped us structure this thing around, as close to 90 minutes as we could get, because we wanted this thing to be a little more mainstream than Hellier, because Hellier requires investment. It requires you to be part of that journey. This one is a little easier to get someone on that journey with. So it was important to show people how long it took to do this.
Yeah.
One of the things you notice when you're watching it is you've got Carl's beautiful cinematography in all of the flashback scenes and helping move the story around. The interview shots are gorgeous. And then you have mostly like iPhone
You have a lot of iPhone footage.
Because we never set out to make a documentary. Like, this was just stuff we were covering as it happened. And so we just had to make do with the little scraps of story here and there. And there's, quite a bit, because we document everything as well as we can. So I think that what people are going to see when they watch this is they're going to see something that feels far more involved than what they're normally used to seeing, and maybe a little more serious than what they're normally used to seeing in projects like this. But it's only because we make it ourselves that we have the time and the ability to do that. No one else would let us make the Unbinding.
Yeah, I think, when you really think about it, it probably from beginning, at least the filming of the documentary and the making of the documentary, I think probably took us close to 4 or 5 years to complete. And a lot of that is really just because we are very, very lucky to be able to take that much time. And a lot of that has to do with, the fact that we're such a small group of people, and we're like, there really are only about 5 of us that work on Hellier and the Unbinding. It's a small crew of people. And we can kind of put it through its paces and get it to where we want it to be without having to worry about, network people expecting things at a certain time. But also, a majority of the case and a lot of the experiments and the investigations that happened in front of our Patreon, in front of our museum members, like literally live streams with museum members. There's a lot of that in there, and that is because it's sort of authentically documenting an investigation that took place over the course of 5 years maybe. So you do see a lot of museum member related content, and you see a lot of us talking about museum members. And again, a lot of it is just because they were there with us. They were part of the investigation. They were there along with us as we were doing a lot of this kind of stuff.
The recreation scenes at the Paranormal conference, those are all museum members you see milling around there.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So we did our best, because truly, and this is I'm not blowing smoke. This is the truth. We would not be able to do what we do for a living if it wasn't for people who supported us.
Absolutely, yeah.
They give us the ability to take the time and care that we have.
We're very lucky.
So we, as much as we can, try and thank them by, there's little Easter eggs. There's literally museum members in the movie.
Yeah. There's a lot of Magic of the Month members in the movie. There's a lot of that, and they really are. You're right. It's the museum members are sort of the extra team member throughout the course of the investigation, and you really feel their presence there a lot.
Yeah, I like what you said about you set out to make a horror movie, because as museum members ourselves, we have seen quite a lot of this journey. So I was quite surprised by how actually really terrifying and horror movie it did feel. But then at the same time, later on, I was crying and really emotional. I needed the Kleenex, you know.
Yes.
So that's why this is so exciting to us, and we've been looking forward to this for so long, is because exactly like you said, this is something that could not ever be made for mainstream TV. It just wouldn't.
And it's been fantastic as a museum member to see behind the scenes, like there's bits in there that we remember watching from years ago. And it's like, I remember that. Cool. And it's just such a task to bring all of that together. You know, it has, as you say, taken years to pull together. Yeah. And like, it's so close now to being public. Like what's going through your heads at the moment?
As you're about to release it into the world.
I'm kind of back and forth, where one minute I'm very excited, and I think at this point I'm really ready for people just to see it, but I'm definitely I go back and forth from being very nervous, like, oh no, are people gonna like it? And then you just sort of go through the motions.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I think, there's a lot of pressure, to bring something out that isn't Hellier 3.
Yes.
What like everybody keeps asking for. So, we're working on it. But there's definitely a little bit of pressure there. And, you wonder what people's expectations are for what our projects are going to be like. And this one is geared more toward the mainstream viewer than anything we've made before.
Yeah.
Like this is
easily
made to try and capture the imagination of people who aren't in the paranormal community. Who just, they watch the Conjuring movies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so part of me wonders how they're going to accept the message. Are they going to accept it? How are they going to respond to it? Are they going to get what we're trying to say? Because, I don't think it's a secret to say that everything that we make with Planetweird, we're trying to be subversive. There's some things we're trying to subvert. There's some tropes that we're trying to play with, and, not everybody enjoys it. And I do think while we've done a really great job of illustrating what we're always trying to do, the message we're always trying to send, which is choose curiosity instead of fear, and the world will open up to you in ways that you couldn't imagine. There will be people who I think are going to be upset.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
when are they not?
You let it loose? What did you do?
I think the thing too, and it's funny because one of the hardest things for us is like recognizing that people will watch the things that we make, because we always forget, like, oh, wait a second, people are going to watch this. This is so strange to me. But when we made Hellier, we were just kind of trying to document an experience that we were collectively having. And I think there's a lot of that also in the Unbinding. And what happened with Hellier that was such a surprise to us was that there was a lot of people who reached out to us and went, this is the alternative that I've been wanting to find, or it's so nice to see people doing things the way I do things. And it was such a great feeling, because it made us realize that we weren't alone, and and there were other people out there who thought about things maybe the same way or approached things the same way. And my hope is with this documentary that it will do the same thing.
Yeah. I want to live up to people's expectations.
And that's kind of what we're hoping will happen with it as well, because like we said at the start of the show, we've kind of come around full circle, which is lovely as we kind of start to wrap up. But the sense of relief and community that we felt when we found your work, I want more people to be able to access that. And that's really the root of why we're so excited about the Unbinding going out into the world. The thought that there are people out there like us that are jaded and disillusioned and feeling uncomfortable. There's going to be this platform out there that you're now putting out that they can find, they can access, and they can get that same sense of community and relief. And it's not just me. These are my people. And that's precious.
Yeah, and hopefully, the other thing is it's at least I hope it's a reminder that 5 people made this. So make things. Make things.
You can do
put
this.
them out into the world. It's possible. You can make things, whether it's podcasts or documentaries or books or whatever it is. This space needs more people who are coming at it from that particular, approach to be putting things out and inspiring other people too. So hopefully it acts as a inspiration for creative people who are maybe nervous about trying to do things on their own. It just waiting around for TV. It often is people often have bad experiences with it. So It's really like Greg said, a majority of the Unbinding is iPhone footage. So get your phones out and start making things.
Yeah, make stuff. Tell good stories.
Yeah.
Change that is truly how you change the world.
Yeah.
Is by telling good stories.
Yeah. Change the narrative.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And we're just trying to make the stuff that we wish we'd had.
Yeah.
Really,
truthfully, yeah.
Whether it's, the museum community, whether it's the projects we're making, we just are making the things that we wish we had. The stuff that we wish we had when we were little weirdos, and now, we're big weirdos, so we can do it.
Adult weirdos.
Yeah, we can very much relate to that.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think even though we've had a behind the curtains look at the Unbinding already, which is very kind of you to share with us, we're so excited to let others or to hear from others that experience the Unbinding. So when's it being released and where can people see it?
This is a big one for us because this one comes out everywhere worldwide on September 8th.
Wow.
I think that internationally it'll be available on Apple TV and Google Play. So I think you can purchase or rent it on YouTube worldwide, but it'll be everywhere September 8th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, I can't wait.
Can't
we've already seen it, but we're still so excited for it to just get out into the world and for other people to watch it and to hear what they think and how it's affected them and if it's, meant something to them.
Yeah. And there's going to be
conversations.
There's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to watch this, be absolutely fascinated and want to find out more about who you are and what you do. And where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, if people want to know more about us, all the projects that we make are available at planetweird.tv. That's a really great hub for that. If they're curious about the things that we do with the museum, they can always go to newkirkmuseum.com. They can become a museum member and they can see all of this stuff, like you guys did years before. And then we can sit there and tease them for 5 years.
And we can highly recommend doing so.
Well, this has been just the most amazing conversation. We knew it would be, and we just cannot wait for the release of the Unbinding, and we can't wait to see what you do next either. So thank you so much for joining us, and we're really excited to see where the journey takes you in the future.
Oh gosh,
thank you
for
so much.
Us.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Great conversation. Thanks for making us feel so loved.
And that was Greg and Dana Newkirk, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to that interview as much as we did recording it.
As this episode comes out to you, you've only got a few more days to wait until the release of the Unbinding. We really hope you give it a watch, and we'd be really interested to see what you think if you do. And we'll be back in your ears very soon with our usual array of true ghost stories and paranormal postcards. We hope you'll join us next time on another episode of Knock Once for Yes.
EVP session.